What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Run Your Mouth podcast. It is the pre-Skankfest special episode. Dude, I'm very excited for Skankfest. I'm on they gave me some premiere stage time. If you guys haven't, I would suggest purchasing the Mint Comedy stream. I'm looking forward to that. I was working on some Corona jokes all summer. Haven't really done them in a month, but they were almost working by the end of the summer. So I'm going into this with a positive mental attitude that these are going to be the best Corona jokes anyone's ever heard. And there's a limited window where you can still even tell Corona jokes because it doesn't exist anymore. Fauci's still out there going, could be bad this winter. Everyone, don't let your guard down or your mask down because it could get real bad again. It could. Probably right after I leave, things will go to shit because we gave money to. Oh shit! I'm on YouTube. That's why we were gonna do that stuff at the end. I'm sorry, YouTube. I didn't mean to say anything bad about Fauci. I think he's done an excellent job, and I'm excited for his next career when he leaves, and then he gets a lot of money so that he can do all sorts of other things. Anyways, putting together some new tour dates, and I got some really cool ones coming at you guys. Links will be up in the episode description shortly. At the moment, November 3rd. No, that's the wrong date. I think it's November 5th. I'm going to be in Austin with none other than Scott Horton. I'm going to be doing stand-up, and then me and Scott, we're going to do a podcast all about Liberty lessons that you can learn from Star Wars. And then the days before and after that, we're doing a whole Texas tour. So I'm going to be Dallas November 4th, going to do a live pod in addition to live comedy. I might do Texas A&M. If for some reason you got a spot in Houston, you got a backyard, I want to do a show in Houston before I leave Texas. The other cities that I'm targeting, and I was talking to someone about Kansas, but I'm going to be doing Omaha, Nebraska. So I really want to hit St. Louis, and I want to hit up Kansas before that. And then the last one is I got a gig coming up in Tucson, Arizona. So if, I don't know, you got something going on in Phoenix or some other area out there, or you got the connect to Stanhope's house, I'll do a porch tour from Stanhope's house, uninvited. Just show up with the equipment. I don't think that actually be appreciated. Anyways, welcome to the show, everybody. We got a bomb episode coming at you. So let's get into it. Let's start with all of the rundown of topics. Here we go. Historians point to Christopher Columbus' hat as evidence that he might have been gay and confused by the Native Americans as it wasn't the shade of brown boy he was looking to have sex with. Our cultural correspondents ask if Columbus was gay. Can we go back to celebrating him? Speaking of celebrating, what academic credentials are necessary to receive Nobel Peace Prizes for advocating giving more money to banks? With retailers dealing with excess goods and already starting to discount, might we see the greatest Black Friday stampedes of all time? Experts are saying we have to account for how many subcultures have taken advantage of lax petty theft enforcement and have been practicing with the pillaging of local stores. I think I need a better backdrop beat on this. We'll get there, though. Who will give Kanye West a platform to finish telling us about the Jews? Quit pulling interesting social media tirades before the finale. Biden's about to celebrate a birthday and turn 80, but how old does he think he is? European study finds colonoscopies made no difference in death rates, leaving many middle-aged men confused if having had something stuck up their ass for no reason makes them gay, or if they were raped by science. And lastly, we'll be looking into in 2023, how much money will governments spend trying to combat inflation? You see? We got a bomb episode. I wasn't lying to you. Important things will be discussed. But to kickstart this party, why don't we talk about Christopher Columbus for a minute, because that yesterday was Columbus Day. I didn't realize he got off for Columbus Day. And I think it's education's fault for celebrating the guy, because I didn't care one way or another. You made me go to school, and then you taught me about, firstly, does anyone want to be referred to as indigenous people? Like a people with no identity other than the fact that they just happen to have been here first? Is that actually the best that we can come up with? I know it's got a nice spin of, hey, we were here. You might as well be like the first people, the original people. I can't really come up with a better term, but something about indigenous sounds, it sounds more offensive than just Indian. Indian was, talk about, this is why we should be celebrating Christopher Columbus. He's a guy who fucked up, and something great come out of it. the greatest country ever for a while until the Fed came along and then spent all the money and then we did a whole bunch of wars. But we still had the greatest wealth expansion ever that can afford all these socialist programs. And we haven't gone belly up yet. So, like, we're kind of, even though everyone's miserable and complaining, probably living in the best time period that's ever existed in all of humanity. I know prices are going up. The job you want, you can't have. Not everyone can make money online as an influencer, showing off their booty hole on OnlyFans. We're all looking at other people that are doing just a little bit better than us and thinking that we're doing a little bit worse, but we're still at the tail end of an empire that's conquered the world, forced everyone to use its currency, and just been able to print endless amounts of money to the point that people actually believe in modern monetary theory. People actually believe that we've already spent so much and it hasn't gone belly up. Clearly, there's no end to this. We can just keep printing. It's not going to matter. I mean, the evidence is in 20 trillion in the hole and it's still going. So let's just spend some more. Hey, the prices are going up. Well, just give the people more money and then they can afford the higher prices because that makes sense. And I mean, people are actually doing that. Why did I have this thing in this thing? I like moving around. Get fucking weird when I can't move around. All right. What was I trying to talk about? Christopher Columbus. So you got this guy. He thinks he's going to go fuck up some Indians, conquer all their spice trades. Somehow he fucks up. He ends up in America. He goes, all right, these aren't Indians, but I can fuck up these people and enslave them too. And so he did that. That's how you made money back then. You know, we can look back in our eyesights of today and go, the way to make money is to, work at a bank and then take money from other companies, but in a more dignified way where you don't have to actually show up and conquer them. You just force them to fund your currency and then change your interest rates in a way that they can't then afford your currency. And then they get to a point where they need food. And so the IMF comes in and they hand them some money, but they go, now you're going to have to pay us back all this money. And then people are always indebted and enslaved forever. But, we get to feel good about it. We don't have to actually show up and conquer places. So you got this guy, he shows up, fucks up, legendary fuck up. Just made wrong directions. They don't tell you, but there was actually a lady who was steering that ship. Christopher Columbus was pimping out some bitches and, they needed to take a pee break. They got lost. They weren't good with the directions. There was no easy pass back in the day. Next thing you know, he's out in America and it leads to the greatest thing that ever happened for a short period of time until we became an empire. So, let's celebrate the mistake. Let's celebrate that a guy who got something so wrong in his lifetime and was such a miserable fuck up who did not nice things led to some good for a short period of time until we ended up getting a guy with dementia, which is a pretty good ending to the story. If Biden leads us to nuclear war, it's a pretty good ending to the story that we did wealth expansion all the way that we got a television celebrity in. The power elites lost their mind. The only one who could possibly win an election was some old dude who was probably a pedophile and liked sniffing hair. We know that he had a kid who was doing crack. And then we put him into office, and then we started drugging him, and the drugs were turning him aggressive, where he went from some old guy who was just saying nonsense things and squinting at teleprompters to all of a sudden some old guy going, we're going to go to war. Fuck you, Russia. Let's do it. You want a fucking boogie? I'll boogie you all night long. Fucking Putin. I'll take your pudding. Think I give a shit? So that's where we're at. So I'm just saying, why not go with the positive? The guy was bad. He wore gay hats. He conquered the wrong area, but it led to a pretty great thing. And so, all of us, we live terrible lives. We don't accomplish anything. I think it's nice to accomplish a guy who made a mistake, and it all worked out in the end. And it's education's fault. I would have known who Christopher Columbus is if it wasn't for the fact that they taught us classes being like, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue, something else rhymes, and I started to, fall out of tune. But that's what they did. We showed up to school. They told us that these people were super important. And we're like, all right, I'll listen to you if you're telling me the guy's important. Why is he important? And then you memorize the dumb fact. And all of a sudden you become an adult. And they're like, hey, take that fact and throw it out. We didn't realize it, but we were instilling the racist facts in you. Well, that's on you. I already got the racist fact. What am I supposed to do now? You guys gave me the racist fact, so I got to stick with it. All right. Hey guys, moment to plug our new sponsor, Jake's Mint Chew. Not too many companies will sponsor rants like this. Let me tell you, I'm starting to really dig this stuff. I mean, I like this stuff so much I might end up becoming a tobacco chewer. Because here's the thing, sometimes, I'm sitting here and I'm trying to research how they're trying to end the world, trying to research Christopher Columbus, trying to research financial schemes. And then sometimes I end up at a point in my brain where it's just going, fuck, motherfucking, fucking, blah, blah, blah. That's it. That becomes the internal dialogue. And so sometimes, I'll go eat donuts to try and calm that thing that's just going motherfucking cunt and like it's like a Tourette's person who's been standing still too long. And so, anyways, instead of doing all those terrible things, Jake's Mint Chew. No, it's pretty great, dude. I was never a chewer, but you stick it in there and it's good. Even like you're hungry, I'm gonna end up losing weight. It's like crack addict shit. I'm gonna end up a skinny guy. You get hungry, you shove the mint thing in there. It's loaded with mint flavor. It's got the CBD, which calms you down. I think you guys all know the benefits of CBD, and they got a ton of products. I'm getting really into this. It's not dip because it comes in a pouch and it's flavored and it doesn't have nicotine. You don't have to do all the disgusting spitting thing. Probably great if you're actually a tobacco chewer for quitting, but you get to feel like a man because you get to take it, you get to gum it into your lips, and then it's just I think it's calorie free. Who knows? Maybe it's more fattening than the donuts I was eating, but you get delicious flavors with all the calming benefits of CBD. So go check it out, Jake's Mint Chew. They got a whole line of flavors. I like the mint one. I also tried, I think it was like a lemonade one. I got a bunch of other ones. I want to track down a cherry one. I don't know. I got like a craving for some cherry. They got fancy soaps. They got gummies. And you can stick any of their products in their ass. I mean, that's not what they're made for, but if for some reason you wanted to do that, I think you could. I'm not saying that it would be like good for your health or that they're intended for that, but I do think that's something you should be aware of because it's true of almost every product that's out there. You could shove it up your ass. Might not be a good idea, but you could do it. And I feel like the people of Jake's Mint Chew would appreciate me relaying to you that these items could also go in your asshole. Not that they're supposed to be in there, and not that that would benefit your health, but I just think that that's important information. So anyways, if you want to purchase these products, you can use the promo code ROB. You're going to get 15% off. So that's Jake's Mint Chew and 15% off with promo code ROB. All right, so now let's get into strippers that are dominating our nursing homes because that's what we do with our old people. We take them and we send them to a place to die. It's a little bit like when your parents told you, hey, we're taking that dog to a farm, but when they put down the dog, they actually, you know what? Why don't they have better farms for old people? Let them like look out on nice fields with dead dogs. Maybe we could combine the two business models. But anyways, we all do that to our old people. They reach a point, and I mean, other than Biden, that guy reached an age, and then we just put him in charge. But usually, we take old people and we slowly put them down in old age homes, and the whole thing's unpleasant. You try and visit them. You realize you don't have any conversation to make. Then you realize that they're asking you about your life, and it's just depressing them more because you're not having success with your career. And then you start lying. And then every time you show up, you're coming up with bigger and better lies. And then the next thing you know, you've concocted this whole tale about having a family and kids. And then you're like, shit, I'm going to have to tell this guy that I got divorced. Like, I've already spun a whole tale. He keeps asking to meet the lady. I got to be like, it's like you almost start running out of your storylines. You're like, I can't afford writers for what I'm going to lie to my grandfather about. And the next time I visit him in an old age home. So anyways, someone's had the bright idea that let's take some strippers to the old age home and let's let them strip for it because all these old people apparently they're sucking each other off, they're getting STDs, so they figured, hey, instead of these gross old people mashing their disgusting skin together and transferring every viral load that exists because they're all old and they have everything, why not get some younger, hotter people in here and then they can showcase all their goods and then we can please the old people. But old people are getting heart attack. And so people got upset. They're like, this is reckless. You can't be putting strippers into old age homes. But I'm here to argue that is there any better way to go than a heart attack from seeing a hot stripper? I mean, if you're an old dude and you're probably going to go, I mean, it's not like they killed you. If anything, it was like Corona. We pulled the death forward. You were going to die within 3 months, and then you happen to have died of Corona. And, and it was made worse by the fact that government didn't let you see your family and what would have been the last days of your lives. But we're not trying to shit on the government policies related to Corona. We're on YouTube. You get in trouble for that. But what I'm trying to say, other than maybe doing heroin while getting a blowjob and just like drifting off into blackness, I feel like a heart attack while you're looking at a stripper, that's a pretty great way to go. And also, how much money are we spending on all these old people? I'm not saying that we should put old people down, but I am saying we do have a problem that old people kind of do live past their dignity. And sometimes I think people do a few too many repair jobs. It's like when you got that old car. This is sounding terrible. I'm just trying to come out as a pro stripper and heart attacks in old age homes. All right, let's take a couple comments before we do the next story. Amba Bamba. Are you going to talk about the real reason for Columbus Day? Not the discovery of America, the 1891 New Orleans lynching murders of the 11 Italian Americans and immigrants in New Orleans. I'm ignorant of history, but guess what? We've got our Run Your Mouth official historian coming on at the end of this episode, Gary Rich-Eyed, writer of God Damn It, Am I Retarded? His book is unbelievable. It's the something United history of the United States. It's like the one that they didn't tell you in school. And let me tell you, everything they told us was a lie. And he's going to come on in a little bit, and he's going to give us the real story. All right, Forest Mommy back. Why didn't I think of old home stripping? Damn it! Hey, this is still a lucrative career. And now that you know you don't have all the Twitter followings and sparkler butt money coming your way, and you're looking for new income streams, I think that old age home stripping might be the thing to do. All right, what other stories I got lined up? Here we go. Vanderbilt transgender health clinic pauses gender affirming surgery for minors amid GOP pressure. And so, if this pause works anything like pausing puberty, I guess it's never coming back. Boom, roasted. Moving on. Here we go. Next up, we like to celebrate as a society actors and actors, the extremes that they go to for their roles. And there's nothing more impressive than a guy like Christian Bale, who goes from fat to playing Dick Cheney to super skinny so that he can play some drug addict, and the changes that these people go to. And so I'd like to take a moment to salute Lena Dunham and the hard work she's put into and the bodily changes that she's undergone so that she could play the balloon in the live action version of Up. So congratulations, Lena Dunham. Now we've got, oh my God, Tulsi Gabbard, every single news show. She's making the rounds. My God, she puts out an announcement, makes every single newspaper. She gets on the Joe Rogan Experience. She's turning her back on the Democratic Party. She can't be a part of this party any longer. On Tucker Carlson explaining it. I mean, good timing, I guess, if you were trying to, stick it to the Dems just before the midterms and go, this party shouldn't even get your support, because they're out there going, we need all hands on deck. Otherwise, the evil Republicans are going to come back. And so she goes the other way with it and goes, listen, those evil Republicans, well, they might not be that great, but these Democrats are even worse. I don't like the celebrities getting into podcasting. I don't like it. Everyone's like, hey, why am I working for a living? I could just talk from a living room. And that's true. But you guys were supposed to have like the good media jobs. Like even the people with the good media jobs and the senators and the politicians are realizing like, why the fuck am I busting my ass actually working when everyone just wants to listen to people with studios at home? And that's what I'm trying to do. So, where's the government agency that's going to like put a finite number on podcasts? I mean, no one's going to do it as well as I do. Good luck with these people. You know what I mean? How many times do people think that they could do these things and they just fucking fail? But like, shouldn't we have some protection for dumbasses that can't work real jobs because they're inept and don't like showing up to offices, but do like starting podcasts and then pretending like they were really intelligent and have things of value to say? Shouldn't there be some protections for the people in those markets? All right, what else we got lined up? NASA says mission to change asteroids orbit was a success. And of course they did. Are any of us able to fact check this? I mean, talk about all the money that was spent on Corona and all the science that came out about that and how much of a huge success. Think about how many more people would have died if we weren't out there and we hadn't done these things with the things and the shots and the giving it to people and the mask. Can you think of all the people that would have died? And that's like, we could just see that people got sick and then we're fine. And then people got the shots, still got sick, still were fine. The old people who were going to die died anyways. And that's all like the stuff that's right in front of us. You're going to tell me that I got some way of fact checking whether or not some fucking asteroid up in space that NASA decided to put a thing on and then pretend like it changed the orbit? Sure. Yeah, give them more funding. Great work, NASA. I believe you. Just like you were on the moon. All right. Now, I did pull a couple videos, and sadly, the procedure isn't working here as smoothly as it was before, but I came prepared because now I got a new folder. Look at this. This is the Run Your Mouth improvements. I'm not going to wait for my presentation to not load up videos that we need. I'm not doing that anymore. Oh, now I got to download it? What the fuck? All right. It's not going to take too much time. Everyone just hold on. You can entertain yourselves. You can think in your heart about how Yo Kratom, the Jesus of this podcast, continues to support our efforts for original content.
Another pivotal Senate race in Pennsylvania, now considered a toss-up. Our Dasha Burns spoke with Democrat John Fetterman in his first in-person sit-down interview since he suffered a stroke. And Dasha, this was not a typical candidate interview.
No, Lester, because of his stroke, Fetterman's campaign required closed captioning technology for this interview to essentially read our questions as we ask them. And Lester, in small talk before the interview without captioning, it wasn't clear he was understanding our conversation.
Isn't it nice that Biden has inspired other retarded people that they can do these jobs? You know, there was a time that when you were medically disabled, you thought, fuck, I don't get to work anymore. But then Biden came along and he inspired people to go, even if you've got dementia, even if you can't hear all that good, read all that well, talk all that coherently, even if you can't understand what people are saying to you and you don't have the mental cognition to sit down and focus and make intelligent decisions, don't let that get in the way of you making important decisions for other people. Don't think, hey, maybe I shouldn't be in positions where other people are relying on me to evaluate information and then come to conclusions. Don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. Just get out there. Just do the thing that you love, no matter how bad you are at doing it. You don't have arms. Don't let that get in the way of becoming like an Uber driver. It doesn't matter. You know, you've got wobbly hands from Parkinson's. You can still become a barber. Don't let the physical reality, you want to be a man or female with the wrong genitalia, don't let the physical world or your like midgets, you should go play basketball. It doesn't matter. We live in a new world now where no matter what your skill set is, you're still qualified for important positions. That's the way socialism's going to work, because we're not going to have CEOs. We're not going to have people making big decisions anyways. You know, so it doesn't matter what you're qualified to do or not do. You just go out there. You smile, or in his case, look like an ogre, but you just get out there and you do it. And now I've never seen an interview have to start out this way where the propaganda went so poorly that even mainstream media news networks have to give you a little bit of a framing to go, yeah, well, the guy had a stroke, and so we had to make some arrangements, and we know that this footage is going to look a little bit jarring. Like how often do they favorably set it up? And, you know, we got this guy Biden on, and he's got to sit there with notes because he's old, but the notes to really help him cut to the chase of what's important. All right, let's watch the rest of this because it doesn't get any better.
Can voters trust that you will be able to do this job on day one?
Yeah, of course.
This is Pennsylvania Democratic.
30-second delay of even registering the question, but total confidence. Yes, of course. No, I can't read or think coherently, but of course I'm qualified. Really making the other politicians look bad if you are qualified for this.
Senate candidate John Fetterman's first in-person sit-down interview since a stroke sidelined him from the campaign trail for months.
That auditory processing where I'll hear someone speaking, but sometimes I'll be able to be precise on what exactly that they're saying. I use captioning.
His campaign required that he be allowed to use a transcription program on his computer during our interview.
I always thought I was pretty empathetic. Emphatic. I think I was very, empathetic. You know, that's an example of the stroke. Empathetic. Yeah. I always thought I was very empathetic before having.
Maybe he went through a procedure to make him more like Biden. He sat down and he's like, wow, this guy, he achieved presidency, and what a wonderful job is he's doing. Can you do something that I could be more like him? And so they brought him into a lab and they hit his brain and skull with hammers repeatedly until finally he got to a point where he was as dumb as Biden. And they're like, okay, now you can run for office. All right, what else I got lined up here? We got more. I got power stuff coming at you guys. Oh, I got to leave this first. Otherwise, it's not going to work. All right, we're going to do a quick segment here where I'm going to re-explain everything that's going on with the Bank of England, and then we're going to get into our segment, a little bit of a history lesson with Gary Rich-Eyed, all about the real story of Christopher Columbus. You know what? I'm going to change the order here. Gary, are you ready to go?
I'm ready.
I can't hear you. I think
you can't hear me?
You might have to unmute yourself. I think you're currently muted.
It says I'm not muted.
Oh, now I can hear you. Hold on one second.
Okay.
transfer where I got my headphones. Give me 1 second.
No problem.
Now I can hear you. All right. We're going to change up the order. Everyone's out there. They're talking Christopher Columbus. They're talking early America. I like how you're dressed like a politician. You got the little pin. Your suit.
It's a Mises pin.
There you go. Why you look so fancy? Is this you at work?
Yeah, it's me at work.
You got a suit up for your job?
A little bit, yeah.
Wow, you got an old school gig. Good for you, man.
Yeah, I got to pay the bills, you know.
It looks good on you. I mean, you both have to show up to an office and suit up. You're like, you got to be in the 1%.
No, not even close. The bottom 1%? Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So first is let's take a second. Why don't you plug your book? I messed up the name earlier.
You did? Oh.
I did, yeah. I actually have a slide because I knew I was gonna mess it up to introduce you, but now we're all out of order.
Yeah, well, I just authored a book. It was out July 4th. It's called A Twisted History of the United States. It's a libertarian take on U.S. history from 1450 to 1945. Yeah, I co-wrote it with a former student who we were on Run Your Mouth earlier with the summer porch tour. It was awesome. And basically it's in all the boredom, all the bullshit, all of the fake mythology about U.S. history is dispelled there. And it's entertaining. We make historical tweets so as to keep the book moving and interesting. So,
I can say it is it's an easy read, and that like you don't get it like it's smooth flowing, and it's actually very engaging and entertaining. So everyone's all mad. Christopher Columbus. It's Indigenous People Day. We can't celebrate him. What I just find cartoonish about this is I wouldn't know or care about Christopher Columbus in any capacity, except that they like telling us about it a whole lot when we were in school. And then I also don't know any of the actual history of the Native Americans that lived here or our conquering of them, cowboys and Indians. I don't know anything. So I hand it to you to give us a little history lesson.
Sure. And you actually put your finger on something that's probably more important than even Columbus himself as a historical figure. It's the historiography, or sort of the history of how we came to understand Columbus. So basically, if you are on the side of believing that Western civilization, that is the European civilization, coming over and affecting other peoples in other continents is a bad thing, then essentially you hate Columbus. It's a demarcation that you hate Columbus. However, if you see that sort of Judeo-Christian ethics, Western science, dispositions, the Western civilization as a whole is a good thing, then you tend to be more inclined to even excuse some of the, well, we won't call them atrocities, but certainly crimes that were perpetuated. Now, all that being said, that what dominates discussion of Columbus is this sin of presentism. And presentism is like this idea that we apply all of our own standards to the people of a different age, right? And I'm not saying that that doesn't mean that we have just sort of a moral relativism where, oh, we can just say, oh, it was okay for Columbus to forcefully take Indians or something like that, either to Spain or to other islands. But understanding that, think of the setting in which he finds himself. He's in an entirely foreign, exotic land. He's got to find out some way to make this profitable and to also please all of his benefactors back in Spain. And they happen to be the most powerful people in the, Iberian Peninsula, that's Ferdinand and Isabella. And so what's so fascinating about when you talk about, especially the left and progressives, when they deride Western civilization as being something inherently evil, the presentism that is placed upon Columbus and people of his age is very selective. And what I mean by that is, it's like, okay, in point of fact, if you actually look at the historical record, he does have some kind of racial sensibilities. He's very complimentary of the Native Americans. So he talks about their dignity and what he wanted to do for them and with them. And also he was extremely harsh against the Spanish, who were really committing atrocities against the Indians. So he made a lot of enemies. And that's the other thing about the historical record. Columbus had a lot of enemies both in Spain and in the New World. So what the left tends to do is they kind of glom onto these records without analyzing the bias that these enemies of Columbus would have. And they, of course, speak of all the atrocities that he supposedly committed, but there's not a lot of other records that are sort of like what we would call unbiased or without incentive to malign Columbus. So I want to go back to that thing. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, let's just make the timeline a little bit more retard friendly.
Okay,
so
sure.
Let's start with didn't like Amerigo Vespucci or something actually discover, like, who actually discovered, I guess, the Western Hemisphere in America? Was it Columbus?
Well, Columbus, in a sense, is the official discoverer. There's evidence that, for example, the Vikings, like Leif Erikson, had discovered Newfoundland, and that there's other evidence that other Viking settlements had been founded along what's the east coast of Canada.
So then, all right, let's set this up though. So when Columbus is an explorer, like, where are we at in world history? Like, I honestly ignorant. Like, what? So Spain's like the big territory, but like, what's going on at this time? Like, who are the philosophers? Like, what's like the time period? I don't even know.
This is huge, and this is why we have to again situate Columbus in his time and setting. Because if you went back to 1492 and asked some random Spaniard on the street in Madrid or Seville or something like that, what's the biggest event at the end of 1492? Let's say we're January 1st, 1493. We're celebrating the new year, and we randomly ask some Spaniard, what was the biggest event of 1492? None of them would say Columbus finding America. Okay.
Right.
The biggest event was the Reconquista. That is the Spanish king and queen of Spain, Ferdinand and Isabella of Castile and Aragon, had all these Christian warriors. They were conquistadors, and that's important too. They had conquered all of Spain and Portugal, the Iberian Peninsula, and essentially taken it from the Moors or the Spanish Muslims. And this is so important because Christopher Columbus, and Carol Delaney, who's a good historian on this, says that his was a quest for Jerusalem. And what he meant by that was, or what she means by that is, his whole goal was to raise enough funds and make any exploration of the Indies, which he thought he had discovered the Indies, so profitable that he could gather enough gold and silver so as to lead a crusade against the Muslims in the Holy Land.
Oh, so he was actually trying to kill Muslims.
Essentially, yes.
So that's Americans still like that. So we should actually be pro him. This whole thing, he was just trying to, it was like enslave the Indians so that you can then go kill some Muslims. Like, it was just, he had a goal in mind here.
Right. And again, enslaving the Indians, we have to characterize that as, again, what does that mean? For example, like
helping them find better work. You know, they're fucking around in teepees. They could be building buildings that could lead to civilization and more European spreading disease.
Exactly. And to, please libertarians, there was no minimum wage for the Indians. So
right.
That makes
they got corn and peyote. All right. So Columbus, his dream was Columbus Jewish. I've heard that rumor.
There is some thought that he was Jewish, but I think that's just really spurious. He was a really, really devout Catholic.
Just something else they wanted to blame on Jews. Like as they started turning on Columbus and going, this guy was a real piece of shit. Then they also were like, well, he was Jewish. and
he loved gold, so you got that going.
Yeah, exactly. That was actually the only piece of evidence they had for the fact that he was a Jew. That he was in it for gold. All right. So at that time, I guess the purpose of the expeditions was like, it was spice trade, that if you could go get some spices or other things from other territories, that was like super lucrative. Is that the idea?
Yeah. People forget when we talk about the value of spice, because we take it for granted. We go to our kitchen and there's a spice rack, right?
Right.
And there's all that shit, nutmeg, cinnamon, sugar. We take that for granted. But before that, European fare, that is to say Europeans' diets, were extremely bland, even for the wealthy. So spices from the Spice Islands, the southeast of Asia, India, Indian subcontinent, were extraordinarily valuable.
Isn't it funny? Like, people like to, I guess, I'm not saying that American food is healthy or that processed food is good, but there's something funny that we do have this vision of like the health of like older times, I guess, when people ate more naturally. And it's like, dude, they died at 30, and like even the wealthy, I guess, were eating just bland bullshit. Yeah,
there's all these accounts of, especially in times of famine, where the Europeans would have to mix like sawdust and clay into their bread just to make it more substantial.
Was that a real thing?
Yeah.
What would that just sounds like it would clog up your asshole.
There were a lot of clogged assholes throughout.
As long as that's historically accurate. Okay, fine. So we've got Columbus. It's 1942. Christians, they're fighting the Muslims, and he wants to raise more.
1492.
What year did you say?
You said 1942.
Oh, my bad. 1492, right? You got Christopher Columbus. He wants to go get himself some Jew gold so that he can go kill some Muslims in the Holy Land. So what was his fuck up in terms of thinking he was navigating to India and then ending up here?
Well, that's another myth about him. He was, some people argue that he was a shitty mariner, that he just wasn't a good sailor. That's all bullshit. The guy was extraordinarily skilled. He had been through the west coast of Africa. He had been to North Africa. He had sailed all the way with different crews because he was from Genoa. He's not from Spain. So he was, and there's another thing I have to note about Genoa. We'll get to that in a moment. But anyway, he had sailed on all these different crews. He had gone as far as Galway in Ireland. So this guy was not just some, either he's a very good sailor and captain, or he is the luckiest motherfucker ever to not be. And then furthermore, people who say he's a bad sailor, he goes to the same, essentially a new world 4 different times and navigates his way there successfully each time and goes back home. So the idea that he's just sort of bumbling around or he has some divine, well, I guess he thought he had divine protection, but that he has some sort of sorcery type of power.
What a great level of confidence. No, but I wish I could go back to those times where, you could just take over another, because you're white and they're not. So it was God's will that you conquer these other people.
Yeah. And I have a couple sources here if you want to get into there about like how complimentary he was of the Native Americans. He says he's surprised. He says they're not like pagans. They're not like stupid worshiping gods and things and animals. They're actually they sort of understand. They're almost monotheistic. They believe there's a heavenly power. And so he says in this letter that I have here, he's like, listen, I think these people are ready to receive what he thought was the greatest thing was the Christian gospel, and will convert them for the glory of God. And for him to say that and then do all these atrocities seems very strange. It doesn't work. All of another thing was his enemies. Like a lot of people talk about how there was this Dominican priest there named Bartolome de las Casas, and he's like the defender of the Indians because he wrote an official letter about the atrocities that the Spaniards were committing. But guess what? Las Casas had slaves. He had large encomienda, and he was a political opponent of Columbus at the time. So again, the source is kind of biased. So whereas we know Columbus didn't have any slaves. We don't know that he had any personal slaves himself.
What's the run from Columbus to then like the founding of America? Like, why is this even important for American history?
Well, it sets the stage for this grand, really conflict that comes to fruition and is really intensified by the Protestant Reformation. So you have the formation of these big nation states starting in Europe, really in the 15th, 16th centuries. And they're all going to start competing with one another for wealth, territory, and the like. And then when the Protestant Reformation hits in the early 16th century with Luther and then Calvin, then they take religious sides. And so once they take religious sides, it's France, Spain, Portugal against pretty much England, the Dutch, that is to say the Netherlands. And although because Germany's so fractured, it's not an imperial power. They're all in this existential struggle for the next couple centuries. They're all going to be killing each other. And therefore the New World becomes this theater for those wars and a means by which to, in the case of the Spanish, take a lot of gold and silver so as to fund their military, so as to combat the English for the most part.
So it was basically a place that you could go to try and grab some resources so you could try and kill other people in the name of God.
Yes. For your particular name of God, right? Or your understanding of God. What's fascinating too, and I detail this in A Twisted History that people don't really realize, is that England didn't really give a shit about colonizing the New World in the beginning, because Spain has taken most of the really profitable areas in Central and South America. And so the English, smartly though, they, instead of settling and creating permanent settlements, they just engaged in piracy. I mean, why do all the work of enslaving the natives and
just steal the ships,
all the mining? Just steal it as it's in transport across the Atlantic.
It's so fun to sit in a room and be like, yeah, God told me I'm supposed to kill you. And he's like, well, that's weird because God told me I'm supposed to kill you. Exactly. And you're like, well, I guess it's on.
that was the debate, especially when they couldn't agree on the most simple matters. And actually, if you want some entertaining stuff to read in history, read all the things, the exchanges of Luther with someone like Thomas More in England. And people think that the literature of the time, the history of the time was very clean. Oh, they say the worst shit about each other. Like Thomas More says that he hopes Luther dies of constant bleeding pustules from his ass.
Nice.
And Luther's
still a classic, even all the way back then. Wishing anal cancer on someone was still funny.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. Anal fissures was a thing to ridicule someone about. Yeah.
I bet Benjamin Franklin had a dirty asshole. That's what I would guess.
Yeah, we addressed that on the last show, and I definitely agree. I mean, I told you, he was famous for air bathing. So he would just go out and be naked, and he would do that.
Give women STDs.
Elderly. Oh, for sure. He
definitely had
champion.
All right. Before we call it, firstly, it was a pleasure to have you on. Once again, it's A Twisted History of the United States. I recommend it. It is a worthwhile read. Any last and closing out remarks in regards to Christopher Columbus that you think people should be aware of as he's demonized? They cover up his statues.
Yeah, he was a skilled mariner, a devout Catholic with a mission. And the last thing I would say is, like, when I was talking about that presentism and how we judge Columbus in his time, the natives, it's so selective, that presentism, because the natives never get that sort of trial or look at them, because the natives were enslaving each other and they were practicing really heinous stuff like cannibalism and brutality and torture. So, but that's never really given a look because of this motif that really comes from a shitty part of the Enlightenment, that the natives were noble savages.
Before I let you go, did Christopher Columbus ever get his turn with Pocahontas? Like, did they pass her around, or was that like an exclusive relationship?
No. I think John Smith was pretty exclusive about that one, but yeah, and she probably didn't encounter Columbus, at least as far as we know.
All right, fair enough. These are the things that I like to clarify. Gary, it's a pleasure having you on, and now I'm going to get into some financial news. Later, buddy.
All right, see you, buddy. Take care.
All right, that was Gary. Go check out his book, A Twisted History of the United States. Let me switch back my headphones here. And okay, so a couple weeks ago, we got into an episode, and I was talking about the things that were going on with the Bank of England, because it seems like they were getting back into quantitative easing. And what's interesting about that is then you start wondering, as all of the central banks seem to work in lockstep, are they changing course? Are they all going to go from quantitative tightening to quantitative easing, which would mean, hey, inflation, like you gotta put all your money into these assets because these assets are going to be going up, or maybe you want to be holding on to cash because you think that there's going to be deflation. And that's the problem. None of us know what the Fed's going to do. And so, we're all lost. We don't know what to do with our money because the Fed keeps fucking up all the signals all the time. So that was the framework by which we wanted to have a conversation of why the Bank of England seemed to be getting involved and bailing out BlackRock and the investment that BlackRock had put various pension funds into. So before we start, and I understand that this is somewhat repetitive, but let's be honest, I didn't even understand what I was saying. So you definitely didn't understand my incoherent dribble at that time. So what we're going to do is it's going to be slightly less incoherent dribble this time. And then by like the fifth time I repeat it, we're all going to have clarity on this. And then we can go to other places and be like, you're wrong. And I actually understand this because I listened to Run Your Mouth. And that guy spent 30 minutes reading newspaper articles and then rehashed the ideas that he saw there. All right. So let's recap some of my general perspective of the financial markets. One, it's all just a big hostage situation. It's a hostage situation because if anything happens on banks' balance sheets or to, bigger Wall Street firms or to pension funds, little signals get screwy. And if the signals get screwy, showcasing the fact that the financial system is working, then everyone panics. And then mainstream people lose their money and the whole system collapses. So there's a bit of a hostage situation that since all of our money is wrapped into the system, these players will get a bailout because if their shit folds, if their investments fold, then you end up with all this leverage coming out of the system. Things start collapsing. You get signals of the fact that the whole thing is corrupt, that there isn't actually as much money as they claim exists. Everything's leveraged. It's a fucking house of cards of, well, I've got this asset from that guy, and so I deposit in his bank, and then he's like, well, I've got this asset, he deposits in that, and the thing just keeps fucking pyramiding where you think that there's all this money and the money doesn't exist. And so all of a sudden, if one of the cards starts collapsing, which would happen to the banks first, the Fed instantly comes in and goes, oh, we can't have that collapse because everything else is going to collapse. So it's a bit of a hostage situation. All right, next is rising interest rates should not require a bailout. When we're in a low interest rate environment, you can figure that over a long enough time frame, interest rates are going to go up. If you have a plan for pension fund holders, and this is a hedge, so you would think you're using the most sophisticated minds in all Wall Street to come up with something that's hedging the pension fund portfolio, a rise in interest rates should not require a government bailout to keep your pension fund solvent. That does not make any sense in any capacity. It is quite natural that at some given point in time, interest rates are going to go up. In fact, it's a very odd bet that you would be betting against interest rates going up when interest rates are very low. And then it's an even odder bet to be doing that in a highly leveraged way that could take down the entire financial system. So let's just understand that the health of this entire operation can't be all that great if a slight uptick or an increase in interest rates is bankrupting what's supposed to be one of your more, I would think, conservative investments. Next is, if you have bailouts like this, then like it's just everything's socialized. Anytime that there's ever going to be a loss, the government just comes in and it bails them out. And so it's like, how can I explain this? All right. Imagine, wait, I need like 10 seconds. Can we all have 10 seconds of silence? And you guys can think of Yul Kratom again in your heart and thank them for all the support that they give us. I don't have the example. I'm gonna have to come back. I have an idea in my head, but I feel like if I say it, it's gonna be too dribbly, and so I need it to be a little bit more of a stream. But I've logged the thought. I'm gonna come back to that example at another point in time. It would appear to me that they're using leverage to cover a Ponzi scheme. So just keep that line in your head, because you're gonna find out as I divulge the bigger picture of what happened here, that they were using leverage, a very risky investment, so that they could cover the losses of the general Ponzi scheme. Now, my sources here, I was reading through Zero Hedge, New York Times, Wall Street, MoneyWise, and BlackRock statements because I didn't actually source everything. All right, so let's take a look at what was going on. So, by the way, the Bank of England seems to be engaging in more bond buying, which is why it's interesting, because it's in the backdrop of whether or not all the central banks are also going to have to be forced to go to quantitative easing. And I believe that this just showcases the fact that this entire system, it's one big facade. It's one big facade, and they're constantly going to have to bail out the banks, because if just a slight increase in interest rates is leading to failures in pension funds, then just think about all the possible moves that could happen on the board and all the failures that could possibly exist. And if they're bailing out this one, they're going to be bailing out all of them. All right, so let's give a little bit of the backdrop to what happened here. You've got 10% inflation in the UK, which would mean that there would be a need to raise interest rates because you're going to be engaging in some, let's say, monetary tightening. Then apparently government comes along and they start making all sorts of crazy announcements. And it would seem that interest rates are going to be going up. All right. What were my notes here? Buying own product raises demand and interest rate needed. Oh, right. So then you have the government steps in and they have to finance their debt. And since they have to finance the debt, no, let me explain this better. We're in complicated territory, everybody. So work with me here. The government is trying to bring down the yield on bonds. Yield on bond is the interest rate that needs to be paid. What's an interest rate? It's what you're going to have to pay somebody to take on the debt, right? So if someone thinks that it's risky, that they might not get repaid, they're going to demand more of an interest rate. The more you think you're not going to get paid, the more risk you do in having to make that loan, the more of a price that you're going to have to pay that person. So all of a sudden, the government ends up in a, or stated differently, because it's not just a function of risk. Let's say you really need your money. There's not a lot of money available. Let's say you only have enough money for your month and like to go on one date. So what's the cost at which you'll give up that extra $60? Let's just say your rent is $600, right? You spend $400 a month on food and you're earning $1,100 a month. So you've got $100 that you can spend on stupid shit. All right. So what would it cost for you to give up that $100 excess money that you have? Are you going to give it up for 10%? Are you going to give it up that $100 that you have that you can go have one night and go out and have fun? What are you going to give that up for? Are you going to give it up for $10? Would someone have to give you $50? What is the cost by which you would be willing to give up that money? So if all of a sudden there's less money available and you need more of your own money, someone's going to have to pay you more for you to give up the money. Everyone with me here? So there's two factors that would go into the interest rate that someone would have to give you. One is the risk. Two is how much money is currently available. If there's not a lot of money available, then you're going to more likely need your money and people are going to have to pay you more to loan it to them. So the government sometimes ends up in a problem where there aren't that many buyers of its debt. So the government steps in and it starts buying its own debt. But think about like how much that just doesn't really make sense. If the problem is like that you don't have enough money available and then you're spending more of your own money to buy more of your own product, it all starts sounding very much like It's Always Sunny circular nonsense. To me, this is almost like if you had like buildings, you're like renting rental units, and the prices start coming down on the rental units because there isn't enough demand for the rental units. And so you start renting some of your own rental units so you can pretend like there's a higher occupancy that there is. And now you can dictate the prices on the other one. Well, but then I'm spending more money to try and get other people to spend money that they don't have. The whole point is that at the current price, nobody wants to buy the thing. There isn't enough demand. So then the price has to come down. I'm trying to charge $700 on a rental unit and nobody's buying it. And so the signal is, oh, I better lower this to $400 and then maybe people will be interested. But instead of doing that, I go out and purchase my own units so that I can support the price floor of $700. I mean, just if you take a step back and you look at this for any other product, does that make sense? It sounds to me like, I mean, it just sounds fucking screwy because the whole system is screwy. All right, so let's continue. Wolf Street, very good website on this stuff. So his analysis was correcting the bad debt. What was my note here? Wall Street analysis of correcting bad debt don't matter announcements. Right. So he was saying that essentially the UK made a couple aggressive announcements, I think in regards to tax cuts and other money spending. And as a result, that increased the interest rate because I guess there was people were expecting more inflation based off of the current UK policies on top of the 10% inflation that existed. I'm not 100% on this point. I'm filling in the blanks from what I remember reading this morning. And so as a result, there was a rapid increase in the price of the gilts, which are the government bonds. Gilts is actually a technical term, not just for UK bonds, but bonds of a higher grade. But in this case, we're referring to it in terms of government bonds. And so in this case, there was a quick distortion of market signals. Pricing went up, and so they had to step in. I call bullshit on that because it seems to me like these products were going to fail no matter what, and I will explain to you why. So what were these products called? There were liability-driven investments. Funds went down in volume. All right, so and to explain what happened with the liability-driven investments is that with interest rates going up, these fell in value. The reason why they fell in value is that essentially they owned bonds at current prices. And so if the interest rate goes up, then your bonds fall in value. Very simple. If you own bonds, don't buy bonds if bonds are currently at 1% and you think next year the government's going to start paying 4%, don't buy a bond with a 1% coupon rate because then it's going to be because since it's earning less every single year, all of a sudden you have to devalue it relative to owning those other bonds and you will have lost money. Go take a finance class on time value of money. But that's essentially it in a nutshell. So if you think interest rates are going up and you're owning current day bonds, yeah, you're going to fuck yourself. Now, take a step back and understand that this is entirely the problem of living in low interest rates environments, is that if you have people like pension and retirement funds and they want something that is stable, then people with money lose out when there's a low interest rate, because then they can't earn money on their money. So if you have a lot of savings, it's very nice if you can just park that shit in a bank, buy CDs, and make 4, 5, 6, 7, 8%. When that environment doesn't exist, it forces you to do riskier shit. Now, if you're in a pension fund, you have a bit of a problem because you want to pretend like, well, firstly, pension funds are underfunded, which is part of the whole Ponzi scheme, and it ties into this. But essentially, you want to find things with a stable return with minimum risk. But when government creates low interest rate environments, those products don't exist. So you're kind of fucked. And so here, we're going to find out. So what happened here? So what they did was they did extreme leverage on basically, it's not so much they were betting on falling interest rates. What they did was you had low coupon paying bonds. And so I don't even understand the product that they seem to invest in for themselves, but they created like options on bonds so that they were ultra leveraged. So allow me to explain. Let's say I wanted to buy, let's call it Run Your Mouth. I put up Run Your Mouth stock, and the Run Your Mouth stock is at $100 a stock. I've done very well in my IPO. You can buy Run Your Mouth stock for $100 a share. So if you want to buy a share, you're going to have to put up $100. But there's another option for how you can get in on investing in Run Your Mouth Corporation. You can buy options, and the options are only going to cost you $1, right? So now all of a sudden, instead of buying one share, you could spend $100 and buy the options for a lot more shares. What's the actual math on that? Man, am I out of the fucking financial racket? I would think 1,000, because usually when you purchase an option, it's the option. No, I guess you're buying the option on one share. So $100 would give you, yeah, it's 10x. $100 would give you the option to buy 100 shares as opposed to $100 buying you one share, right? And so if you buy the options, the movements are going to pay you out a lot more. So they did something similar in bonds in that they weren't actually buying the bonds. They were somehow buying a leveraged position on the bonds so that they could make back more of the interest rate payments, because the interest rate payment on like a typical bond, firstly, this entire thing makes no fucking sense, because the entire idea of a bond is I'm going to actually loan you a full $100, and then you're going to, because I have access to capital that you don't, and so you're going to pay me 4% on it. So as to how you create a leveraged product that's going to pay you out the interest rate on money that you didn't put up already makes no fucking sense. And then the idea that you somehow have a leveraged position in bonds in a lower interest rate environment, also fucking stupid. Okay. Now, here's what they claim. So these people, they got this LDI, which is some extreme leveraged position so that they can somehow find risk-free yield in environments with low interest rates. Because what's happening with their pension funds is that they have to forecast being able to pretend like the Ponzi scheme's alive and that they can pay everyone out on a set schedule. And so the only way that they can do that is by creating another leveraged product with money. In other words, they don't have enough money in the system to pay out the pension liabilities that exist. It's a fucking Ponzi scheme. So they create some new leverage product with money that doesn't exist, once again, because we're talking about that they're using leverage, so that they can collect the yield on the money that they haven't even lent. I know that this makes no fucking sense, because it makes no sense. And by the way, I invite anyone on the show that wants to explain to us the way that these LDI products were working, because no one really explains it. I'm giving you guys the general picture from what I can ascertain. And if it makes no sense, it's because the whole fucking thing is nutty. But it's good to understand the nuttiness of it. All right. So then what happens is these people need to hit their margin calls. And so in order to hit their margin calls, what they're doing is they're selling. I think they're selling off. I could have this backwards once again. Jesus Christ, I really thought I had this in order. They're selling off their gilts so that they can raise money to hit their margin call. No, they're buying gilts. They're buying gilts so that they have more collateral on their LDIs. And since they're buying gilts, they're further. No, they'd have to be selling it, which would be sending the interest rate further up, which created the death spiral. There you go. because as the interest rates go up, their product's worth worse. They're more at risk at a margin call. And so to hit their collateral requirements, they're selling off the gilts, which is further driving up the interest costs. And so the government comes in and they bail them out. And of course they claim, well, it was the speed at which all of this was going on. All right, so let's get into a little bit more of what the LDI products were. And once again, if you're wondering, like, why are we in the weeds on this one product? It's because this is just one product. You think this is the only product that they have on the board? You think this is the only risky asset that exists in all these people's portfolios? Or does it sound like a movement in any direction is going to require some sort of a Fed bailout to correct what they've done for the elite players? All right, this is from marketsmedia.com. One of the many challenges these pension plans face is how to ensure that the value of their investment matches the amount they need to pay out retirees. The value of future pension payments is prone to fluctuations with the rate of measure such as inflation and bond yields, requiring the pension plans to mitigate or hedge those risks if they can. The amount retirement plans are expected to pay out to their members in the future are also known as liabilities, and so-called liability-driven investing or LDI strategies aim to match the value and time horizon of their current assets to those future liabilities. So here's the marketing for it. Hey, we're running a Ponzi scheme. Pension funds don't actually work, especially the government ones. And so we've got a product with a fancy name that's going to be able to fix the hole in the Ponzi scheme. That's what they're describing here. All right, let's read some more. In recent decades, we have been in an environment of low and falling bond yields in the UK. This market environment has meant the present value of those pension fund liabilities, whose amount grows as bond yields fall, was often larger than the value of their current assets. That is, the pension funds had shortfalls, they were in deficit. In other words, it's a Ponzi scheme. Pension fund does not have the money to pay out all the people that are retiring that are going to need that money. One way retirement plans to minimize possible shortfalls is by using some of a given fund's asset to borrow capital so that the scheme can invest further to grow the value of their current investments for the benefit of future retirees. In other words, we don't have enough money, so we're going to place riskier bets. What we're going to do is we're going to borrow money so that hopefully we get more returns on the money that we borrowed and we can cover our shortfalls. This has been standard practice for many defined benefit retirement schemes in the UK for more than 20 years. Given some pension funds have less assets than liabilities, there's a need for schemes to use borrowing to get both the necessary exposure to liability, sensitive assets, as well as exposure to growth assets like equities to help make up these shortfalls. In other words, they don't have enough money, they need to borrow money, take riskier bets, and hope that they can cover their losses. Sounds like a Ponzi scheme. What went wrong? I believe that this is from a different newspaper article. The way LDIs works is that to arrange coverage, funds put up collateral, and if yields rise, they have to top up that collateral because the underlying asset, the gilt, is worth less. Normally, funds can easily meet this margin call. They have liquid assets and cash, and usually have days or weeks to make the payments. What went wrong was that the yields rose so sharply that the managers had to come up with the cash in a number of hours, says Hal Jones on Reuters. Many funds didn't have enough spare cash to meet the calls. They were into the next most liquid asset, gilts, with funds typically holding a lot of long-term inflation-linked variety. This is what they always like to claim. It's the speed. Firstly, it's still cheating. It's still cheating if the Fed comes in and they bail you out because things didn't happen at the speed at which you had anticipated. But in this case, you guys are ultra leveraging that bonds yields are going to stay at the same. It's such a dumb fucking bet. And so everyone's making this play. But the problem is it's because you're basically the government's bailing themselves out on pension funds and trying to pretend that they work. All right. You guys want a safe asset, something that's definitely going to pay off? It's sheathunderwear.com. You just go to sheathunderwear.com, use promo code RYM. You get yourself 20% off and you can present your goods for the holiday. Look at the holiday line. You telling me you don't want to see your girlfriend wrapped up in some sheath, or your girlfriend doesn't want to see your junk bulge all up in this Christmas decorations? I know it's here early. I just want to let you guys know in advance. Get yourself some fucking sheath shit. Start getting in the holiday spirits and seasons. And they got all sorts of new stuff coming out. And you use promo code RYM. You can get yourself 20% off. All right. I hope you guys feel informed.
So a question for you, Miss.
I hope that makes you feel better about the financial world and all the chaos that's going on. But before we call an episode, it's time to come down from YouTube as we discuss a topic in regards to COVID, and this is going to close out the show. And for all you folks listening, there's going to be a whole second half to this episode. We've already done an hour, and there's like another hour and a half coming at you, which is going to be the fourth in series of the Hate Watch Party, which I think it's going to have to be the last of the Hillary Clinton show. I don't think I can bear to watch another episode. There isn't even enough that happens in it to like make jokes at, because Hillary Clinton doesn't talk. She sits there and she nods, and then she smiles and she laughs awkwardly. I mean, I don't get it. I don't get the point of the show. I would like to continue doing the podcast with Brian, but I think we're going to have to collect other and broader clips, because I don't know if I have it in me to watch another episode of Hillary Clinton. And then once again, links in the episode description. The one ticket I already have for sale is the show with Scott Horton. And then I got other Texas dates coming at you. If for some reason you've got a spot in Houston, St. Louis, Phoenix, Arizona, or Kansas to do a show, let me know. And that's probably going to be also upstate New York. I think we're going to do like upstate New York and Albany, and possibly, quite possibly, St. Michael coming through with the recommendation of subtitles on Hate Watch. That is a good idea. Quite possibly, if I get another end of year together, we'll do a New Hampshire and Boston run, but that's not looking likely. All right, let's get into this last piece of content for the episode, unless you're listening, in which case you can check out the entire second half, which will be with Brian from Lions of Liberty. All right, let's remove this.